Just like it's done every day for the last 4 months, the beeping alarm of my Omega Speedmaster watch wakes me from sleep. The first thing I do is open my laptop computer and check the schedule. Today, I see a vertical red line that marches from left to right, passing over all of my daily tasks. As I finish tasks, I will mark them completed on this program, and the ground will be able to keep up with my progress. My job today, as it is every day, is to keep up with the red line. My first task is to reconfigure a toolbox that arrived a couple of weeks ago on an unmanned cargo spacecraft. Basically, I need to consolidate 2 toolboxes into one. That may sound simple, but in zero-G, with tools floating all over the place, it can be a nightmare. I scan through the procedure and note that it's long, complex, and highly choreographed. This procedure, like all procedures on the ISS, assume a certain starting condition. Starting conditions assume that the equipment I'm to work on is in a certain configuration, that switches are set a certain way, cables are routed a certain way, etc. Many times, these conditions do not accurately reflect the actual situation and configuration on board the ISS. Today is no exception. The problem is that few of the tools are in the starting place assumed by the procedure writers. It doesn't take me long to realize that the highly detailed procedures cannot be executed as written because they assume the wrong starting conditions. To accomplish the task, I will have to request a change in the procedure. I will have to be particularly diplomatic when I bring up this observation. In the past, when I pointed out discrepancies and offered an alternative approach to ensure that I can achieve the desired objectives, I, at times, met stiff resistance. So, after I dress, brush my teeth, and get a bite to eat, I call the on-duty capcom on our onboard phone so that we can talk privately. On the call, I notice that the capcom is getting irritated. I ask him why. Someone worked a long time to come up with these detailed procedures, and now you're throwing them out the window, he says. In the calmest and the most diplomatic way I can muster, I try to explain that although a great deal of work went into the procedures, that doesn't change the fact that because they assume an incorrect starting condition, they cannot possibly be used to accomplish the task. I offer an alternative approach. He tells me that they will consider my request. About an hour later, I receive word over the main ISS radio frequency. In a stern and somewhat disgusted tone, the Capcom transmits, "We discussed your toolbox issue, and we are going to allow you to do it your way." The response confuses me. The hostility is obvious, and I try to figure out where it's coming from. To me, it indicates that despite my best efforts, I didn't effectively communicate the reality of the situation. The ground controllers and the Capcom thought that one reality existed, but I knew that what I could see with my own eyes differed greatly from the ground's perceived reality. I couldn't understand why they refused to change their perspective in light of the new facts I presented. I remember a quote from Archbishop Desmond Tutu. "We cannot succeed by denying what exists. The acceptance of reality is the only place from which change can begin." In this toolbox situation, I believe that Capcom became combative because, for whatever reason, he couldn't bring himself to believe that the reality spelled out in the procedure was inaccurate. The fact that someone worked hard to produce the procedure clouded his judgment and created a bias in his perception of reality. There are countless examples of this happening in everyday life. Every day, people have heated, emotional arguments simply because each has a different perspective. It has become so severe that when facts don't agree with our perceived reality, we change the facts rather than change our opinion. Alternative facts are simply tools used to keep an inaccurate perceived reality intact. As I finish reconfiguring and consolidating the toolboxes, I realize that sometimes the common ground that is missing is a common starting condition. When we dolly zoom to the starting condition that the orbital perspective provides, people naturally are drawn together into a more aligned vantage point. In other words, If we zoom out to the point where we consider the implications of our decisions and opinions over the widest feasible geographic area and over the longest feasible time frame, things become clearer and we can make better decisions. That thought reminds me of the first movie in the Matrix trilogy. In one scene, Morpheus says to Neo, "The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is hampering our progress. But when you're inside and you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people that we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still part of that system and are still hampering our progress." You have to understand that most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? In actuality, Morpheus didn't really use the words hampering our progress. He said our enemy, which to me is the same thing. In the toolbox situation, the Capcom couldn't understand the problem because he was part of the problem. He was part of the false reality, and he couldn't rise above it. In a sense, in 1961, and then again more profoundly in 1968, humanity had an out-of-body experience that enabled us to rise above our problems. As representatives of humanity, Yuri Gagarin, and then the crew of Apollo 8, left the physical aggregate body of Earth and looked back upon ourselves. They were unplugged from the Matrix or unchained from the cave, which enabled them to dolly zoom to see what we have always been. One single human family with a common origin, traveling together toward a shared future, for better or for worse. But the mere fact that those experiences were made possible by the ingenuity and cooperative nature of humanity should give us hope that we can build a shared future that we would all want to be a part of. A future where all people can live in harmony with one another and with the planet, where all people can live in peace and dignity, and where the needs of all will be met.